Hello and welcome to Football and Grits. I'm your host, David Ubben, here with Brody Miller. Welcome to the Georgia Victory Lap episode.
This is our Super Bowl episode, man. This is the two biggest games of the year. This is SEC is everything week.
The dogs were barking, and last week we talked a lot about the week that was to come, and it delivered. Brody. It delivered, man. The
Probably in
Tennessee,
the opposite way we expected, though.
maybe a little bit. I thought LSU would push Bama, and I thought they would probably lose close because I've seen Bama play on the road, and I was not impressed. I've seen them in person twice on the road, and then I watched the Texas game on the road on TV. They looked not very good in all three of those games. Granted, Bryce Young got hurt in the Arkansas game, but still. Either way, they didn't look great in either of those games. And I thought 12 points for an LSU team playing the way that they are is a lot. I'm not shocked that they won, but just because again, Bama on the road, we're and then of course they're 12-point favorites again at Ole Miss this weekend.
I know.
Not to give away our pick segment, but I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
And then Georgia Tennessee obviously was not necessarily a compelling game, but man, we got to start there, Brody. That
Absolutely.
was a narrative. That was a narrative shifter, and I think a lot of the conversation around the game centered around the anonymous coach chatter. We had a story. They did not read my quotes on College Game Day, but they did for Pete Thamel, and certainly that was very relevant. After the game, I was on the field, and Zion Logue said something to the effect of, they were supposed to score 50, huh? No, sir. No, sir. And Jalen Carter made himself a lot of money on Saturday, and not from NIL deals. That man absolutely took over that game.
Yep.
Keely Ringo, another guy whose name came up. A lot of coaches were not really on him this year.
Yeah.
And he played an unbelievable game. And I thought it was funny, too. I wrote about this in my story after the game, but he said, Kirby Smart said Sunday morning, Keely Ringo came to him and said, "Hey, coach, can we talk?" He said, "I want number 11. I want number 11. I want to shut down Jalen Hyatt." And Kirby was like, "Okay, Keely, you're 19. I'm probably the best defensive coach right now in college football. Let's have a game plan. You're going to be a big part of it." And Keely had a massive game. I think Kirby was so impressed with this guy's buying in. And I think, too, we'll talk a lot about Georgia on this show. But one of the things that I felt like one of the coaches did say, and I forget if it was in the piece. You have to forgive me. I spent a lot of time talking. But he was very aggressive in saying, hey, look, a lot of teams have talent. He wasn't trying to subtweet the Aggies, but I think in some ways he might have been.
Yeah.
He's like, but Georgia buys in. Georgia plays so hard. He said Georgia plays harder than any team that we have in the SEC. Like, their guys are everywhere. It's like they swarm to the ball. They play good assignment football. He's like, and that's hard when you have teams that are that talented, that can play that disciplined and buy into what you're trying to get them to do. And that's what we saw from Georgia. Everything was clicking defensively. An unbelievable performance from them. Smacked Tennessee, and basically Georgia announced to the world, hey, we won the championship last year. We lost, 15 draft
unreal.
picks, 5 first-rounders from the defense, which is, if you really that's just insane. Like, I think you can talk about it, and then you still see it on paper, and you're like, unbelievable to come back and still be sitting here. We're November 7th right now, and it is there's not a case for anyone else at number 1 right now. We'll see what Ohio State does. We'll see if Georgia gets a little bored, but Saturday was a big plus for the Georgia was just bored over the last month narrative, which I was skeptical of because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know that teams can turn it on and off just quite like that. But this Georgia team looks like it. You look at how they stepped up to the plate when they played Oregon. You look at how they stepped up to the plate when they played, obviously, Tennessee. And then when their backs were against the wall against, Missouri, when they needed it, they looked pretty unbelievable. So this team, for whatever reason, has a switch that they can flip. And, man, I think they broke the switch flipping it on Saturday.
I think, you put it well that it was a reminder that through 4 weeks, everyone agreed they were the best team. Like, there wasn't really a debate. They looked like the best team in the country through 4 weeks. And then, it's hard being a defending champ. It just is. You're not, it's not like, oh, you're just being lazy and flipping a switch. I mean, a little, but like, it's just human nature. It's really, really hard to be a defending champ, let alone when you're playing Vanderbilt or I don't know if they played Vanderbilt, but they're playing Kent State and Missouri and these teams where it's just like, and on the road sometimes it's just hard. And I'm gonna judge now. I'm not gonna judge. I'm gonna be hard on Ohio State, for example, when they have these clunkers because they don't have that excuse. But like, I'm gonna give Georgia that benefit of the doubt that the two, I'll count Florida in there, the 3 times they've like kind of had to get up for a game, they just manhandle teams, and that's who they are. And I am glad you brought up that Kirby's. I think that is, I'm coming to realize, his most underrated like ability is his ability that, man, we've seen his like halftime speeches and stuff. He's good at motivating, and that's you said replacing all these NFL talent, replacing all these starters. I know LSU's a weird data point because 2020 and LSU, and Ogeron stuff was messy, but still that team replaced a similar amount. And by the way, they had top 5 recruiting classes. Like, that talent you would think is there, and it's just really hard. Because
what they do, they went 6-6.
They went 5-5, 5-5, and it's more complicated than just having talent ready. And that's why it's so true that like his ability to get them up, to get these guys ready. It's not just having talent; it's having talent where this guy's been sitting for 2-3 years, and by the time he's up, he's been trained and prepared well enough that he is now an all SEC guy. That so
to me
hard.
It's the mental part of it, because I think there's a lot of really good coaches, right? Guys that understand the game, that understand X's and O's, that can get you on the chalkboard and they can talk with the best. And there's a lot of those guys. There's not that many that can take that knowledge and impart it and get a little piece of their brain in a 19-year-old kid's brain that has a lot of other stuff going on, right? And I think that you saw that with Kirby because, yes, he's got great athletes. A lot of these guys have really high football IQ. They're really good players, but they haven't played that much. This is still a pretty young team. Tennessee is a very old team. That was another thing that did not go in the story that a lot of coaches talked about that they didn't talk about a lot with Tennessee, is that this is such an old team. You guys have been through a lot, a ton of seniors. Obviously, Hendon Hooker's like 24, 25, something like that. This is a team that's been through a lot. Georgia, Kirby Smart talked about it before the season. He hit it with these guys. Said, you guys didn't do anything.
Yeah.
The guys who won the national championship are gone. Y'all are good players, but y'all didn't do that. Well, they might do it this year, bro. Yeah. They might do it this year. We'll see. I don't think Georgia's untouchable, but they are the best team.
And this is like revisionist history, to be clear, but like that would almost build their case more that like they hadn't played as much football. They are so young, and that means they are getting better. Hope they could get better, I guess I should say. And you're seeing that. Like, they weren't, first off, week 1, they were dominant, but they aren't just that team. They are going to keep improving. And yeah, I mean, we're at a point where they have just proven they are that good. And I want to ask you to this, because your piece was so great last week, highlighting all this. And part of what surprised us most about it, I think the biggest thing that jumped out of there was just I think I counted 4 different coaches being like, Georgia's secondary isn't what you normally expect. Keely Ringo isn't that great, all that. And when I watched that game, I'm impressed with so much, right? Georgia looks great. We knew their D-line would be great. But I was blown away by Tennessee, which has everyone on their heels. Every time you get that like 8-yard slant, it becomes 20. They beat everyone on those downfield passes. Every one of those quick slants that Tennessee normally gets their chunk, there was a guy draped on him, and the deep balls were not there. The DBs are what stood out somehow.
Did Georgia miss a tackle on Saturday? Like, that was unbelievable.
And even when they did, it was because they missed like a 4-yard gain tackle, and then 2 guys were there on the third. Yeah, it was wild.
I guess I'll ask Georgia you, like, defensively is wild. What were you saying?
Yeah, like what? And I know you had a really good series of tweets on this too, of like, everyone in theory knows the way to stop this offense, but who has the talent to do it? I believe that was you, right? And I guess just what stood out for you watching that, of like, this was supposed to be their weakness, and they were able to just shut it down.
Well, I mean, I think it's not to sound like Kirby Smart or a coach, but I think it's having a plan, having players buy into that plan, having the mindset and ability to run that, understand, hey, Tennessee's offense is going to have some keys that are going to lie to you. They're going to do a lot of stuff and put you in a ton of conflict. We don't want you to be in conflict. This is what you want to do. This is the plan. This is what we're doing. Okay. You stay on top of Jalen Hyatt. He does not get beyond you. We're going to let Cedric Tillman have 7-8-yard catches. And you're going to tackle him, and we're going to make them go down the field. I mean, Kirby said after the game, no layups. Some Bad Boys Pistons stuff from the 90s. Put Tennessee in the Jordan rules, more or less. It was an impressive performance. And I think also, so one thing that's been interesting, just the narrative around, because the anonymous coach talk was such a it kind of dominated a lot of the conversation last week. I felt like, certainly
in the comments and our comments as well right now. Yeah.
Well, certainly with the game day segment with Thamel was one thing, and Pete did a good job. I imagine we probably had some crossover. I was amazed reading that piece at how similar the comments were. That I'm sure we probably had a little bit of crossover, but a lot of coaches felt the same way.
They just had the same observations. Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately, Matthew C in the chat wants me to name the anonymous coaches that they're either morons or my source was Kirby who wanted to motivate his team.
Like, how are they morons? We've watched Tennessee dominate.
Well, here's the deal. Here's the deal with that.
Wrong.
I think I've heard two schools of thought of like, oh, you shouldn't let anonymous coaches talk, or B, Kirby called in to code red from Sam Pittman to motivate his team. I've heard that one from some people. Listen, here's the deal. I watch a lot of college football. Okay, I feel like I know this sport. I understand a lot about this sport. I don't coach this sport. These guys know more than I do about the X's and O's and personnel and guys. And so I just want to call around the league and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Yeah. And that's what they thought. A lot of people thought Tennessee was going to win the game. No coach that I talked to thought Georgia was going to win big. And about half of them thought Tennessee was going to win. And another couple were like, it could go either way. That was not a toss-up, Brody. That was a statement win. Yes. And I think that's, again, like I said, it's a narrative shifter. I don't think it's that people are idiots. I think that Georgia had shown some warts and you weren't sure what you were going to get. And I think, too, part of it, too, is people, were willing to sort of shrug off that week one game of like, oh, that was great, but we don't really respect Bo Nix. Oregon has a first-year coach. Yep. Oregon's just overrated. They shouldn't have had him number 10. Brody, Oregon was underrated in week one.
We are officially there. Yeah.
And so I get that. I don't think I was going to shrug off like, oh, Oregon stinks, but I didn't think Oregon was going to be in the playoff conversation here in late November, or that Bo Nix was going to be in the Heisman conversation, Brody.
Yeah, no, we'll talk. He's number 2 on mine now.
Yeah, we won't get into that. So anyway, I think it's sitting there, and I mentioned it after the game, but Georgia now has the 2 best wins of the season of anyone else in the country. Yeah. And I also think it's very interesting that this group, even though they don't have the star power, they don't have the experience of last year's group, what they did against Oregon, what they did against Tennessee is better singular performances than anything last year's defense did. Last year's defense was more consistent, was more dominant, but those 2 performances are better than what anything else they put on tape last year, which is that's astounding. That's unreal.
No, it is. Or at least more like jarring and like surprising in a way. Yeah. And just to like Matthew's point of, like everyone getting this so wrong, I don't think it's everyone being wrong, because I think there's going to be a thing now where everyone's like, Tennessee wasn't good. And guys, we have to be able to compile multiple data points to be like these. It's just it's 7% worse than we thought, or whatever. I'm making that number up, but it doesn't mean like they still did that every week. And I want to get to our playoff ranking discussion in a second, because I realize I might be a hot take artist that I didn't know, because I'm the only.
We need to hit on Tennessee when you're done here.
But like Tennessee they had 4 different clear get up, everybody's watching this games before this game. Even if some of them we realize in hindsight weren't that good, I know I still think that matters. I'm a big believer in that. Game day was there twice, and they got up.
Perception, you mean? Or
yes,
in your team
going into it, that was everyone was watching. Tennessee had to play their butt off, and they dominated. That offense is great. Georgia just is also great. I still would take Tennessee over all but about 2 or 3 teams in the country. I really would. Georgia just proved you how good they are. And by the way, that's not me defending, because just so you know, I did have a Georgia minus 7.5 ticket. I did think Georgia was going to win. So but I still think Tennessee's really great, and it's very foolish to get too reactionary. And I say all that to say, I realized I just looked at our piece this morning that we have for those who haven't checked it out, The Athletic, all of our college football writers do our own what we think the ranking will be. I had Tennessee number 3, and I'm the only person in the company who did that, who even had, and I'm like, oh no, am I dumb? But I'm just they have proven more than almost any, and I get the point that Tennessee, some of those wins don't look that great. That is valid, but they've played a very consistently tough schedule and dominated, while these other teams in 2, 3, and 4, they look far shakier. I don't know.
Yeah, I messed up that ranking last week because I thought that I was talking to Daniel. I thought it was supposed to be what we thought the top 4 should be. So I was way off, and I didn't realize we're supposed to be doing a prediction. So my bad. I fixed it this week.
Oh, I actually kind of just did my ranking. Yeah, I did my rank. I did like
It's
what
kind
I
of
was.
unclear, but I kind of feel like
It's for discussion anyway. Who cares?
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, because I made the case last week that the case for TCU at 3 was very strong if you really looked at it and compared it to like Michigan.
Because TCU plays tough. TCU doesn't have that holy crap win, but they have like 6 good wins.
Yeah. And their game control is bad, and that does matter to the committee who was talking about balance and all that stuff. Anyway,
this is
listen,
an SEC show.
I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of, even from like a small portion of Tennessee fans, of like, oh, this was fool's gold. These are, we were fraudulent the whole time. Guys, listen, like Tennessee might just beat Missouri by 40 again. Like Tennessee's really good. Like
going 11-1 in the SEC would be amazing. Like, what are we doing?
I think some of it, and even a couple of the coaches brought this up to me that I talked to them, was the comparisons to 2019 LSU that were coming up. Because if you looked at the numbers, they were fair. And I think Hendon Hooker has played his way into the first round conversation. We'll see what that looks like. Jalen Hyatt has played his way into the first round conversation. All that stuff. I was never really that into it. I just didn't think that they were overwhelming in the same way of a talent, because I felt like Tennessee is a little bit more scheme. When you looked at some of the throws that Burrow was making and some of the catches that Chase was making and all those guys, it was a little bit more like, oh, they're just bossing you. Whereas Tennessee was a little bit more like, it was a little more like scheming you up for Tennessee, where Jalen Hyatt's running uncontested up 60 yards down the sideline. No disrespect, that's great. You still have to make the throw, but I felt like some of the throws that Burrow was having to make were tougher throws and tougher catches, and they were just like mossing you at every turn.
No, I remember Kirby said before the SEC championship game, he's like, they're not doing anything like new or shocking scheme wise. Like there's nothing like it's a good scheme. They're smart, but it's like Georgia, right? Georgia's just smart. They're not like on some new scheme, but like they're just that good. But to the comp thing, it's why comps are ruined, unfortunately, forever, because I knew what the comps were actually saying, and you brought them up very smartly many times. Guys, it isn't saying, and I guess we need to over clarify. I don't know. The comp isn't necessarily you think that this Tennessee team is as good as. It's saying, and this happens with basketball comps the most, right? It's saying there are some really interesting, like in a relative sense, similarities to how this is happening, because they both very much feel like lightning in a bottle, out of nowhere a little bit, and just a bunch of things came together perfectly to just like create something that doesn't really rationally make sense of how good they are. It's a coach who it's the coaching thing. Neither coach is really expected to be that great. The older quarterback, it's the lightning in the bottle aspect and the defense stuff that feels so similar. It's not, they are as good. So the comp's not wrong. It's just like, it's like how, like, if you say somebody has a James Harden-esque game, that means you're saying he's James Harden. It's like, no, they just play similarly, like in scale.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee was 7-5 last year. You talk to people around Knoxville or people, that are Tennessee fans, they'd say, well, we're probably gonna be better this year, but the schedule's tough. So 8-4, if everything falls the right way, 9-3, maybe we'll sniff 10 wins. Nobody was saying, well, we'll beat Alabama, obviously. We'll beat Florida. And then, the Georgia game, if we beat Georgia, then we'll surely be in the playoff. And then if we lose to Georgia, we'll have a good shot.
We'll be really frustrated that Florida made it close. Like,
that was not going to be the conversation. So I didn't really ever buy into the idea that this team was anywhere on LSU's offense's level. I thought the talent was way better on LSU's offense. But the production, the numbers were about right. But
they still are.
But I will say, if they had done to Georgia what they had done,
then it's real.
To everyone else, then I would have said, okay, all right, I guess you're going to have to say that this team is on that level. But they're not.
Real. Yeah.
But they're still really good. They're going to have a great shot at the playoff. I don't think you gotta go on the road at South Carolina and take care of business against a pretty feisty South Carolina team. But I don't know that Missouri and Vanderbilt match up with them well at all. I don't think Tennessee's going to have a lot of scary hour sort of situations. And they need a little bit of help. I'd have to look at it a little bit more closely, but I think as long as you, like the scenario where Tennessee gets left out, I think, is if you have a classic the game where it's decided, it's like an overtime, and then TCU doesn't lose. They got a ton of help. Alabama is gone, so you don't have a one-loss Alabama SEC champion that you got to worry about. I don't think a two-loss LSU gets in over a one-loss especially not with the way that they played.
Ooh, let's get to that in a
Valley.
second then, because that's actually
I don't think that is a possibility. I just don't see that at all. Even if
my
LSU
gut
beats
says
Georgia.
you're right. But the hard thing will be, one, there's just no precedent for somebody like winning the SEC and not getting
Well,
in.
and the
Two,
head-to-head is like, that's just, you can't do it with the head-to-head. You can't.
but that's the
Tennessee
thing.
fans
They
might
will have
burn down the
beaten
playoff.
Georgia. They will have wins against, at that point, Georgia, Ole Miss. They will have 3 top 10 wins, basically.
Yeah,
in
but
that
you're still
scenario.
talking about a 1-loss team versus a 2-loss team that also, at the end of the day, beat them on their home field by like, what was it?
Oh, I
30
see, the
points or something
Tennessee
like that.
LSU. Okay, that's just I don't know the answer. Like, I think that you could argue it so convincingly either side, and this is all
Now
hypothetical.
maybe that's the scenario where you get 3 SEC teams.
Well,
in,
that's
which would
a
be
real
very
possibility.
funny.
But
That's not out of the possibility.
because
at
TCU
all.
might slip up too. Like, let's not rule
That's
that out.
and then you need TCU to lose. Now TCU is a touchdown underdog on the road this week at Texas.
Yeah.
With game day in tow. I don't know what to make of TCU. They've been behind a lot, but they're winning. They're having a lot of fun. I'm a big Sonny Dykes fan. The Hypnotoads powers are leaning into. I'm right about TCU a little bit this week, Brody. Actually, so
I think it's fair to say like TCU is probably not one of the 4 best teams, but they deserve to be there.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's the best way to put it. Like,
I think so.
Yeah, but no, the thing with the LSU debate that's going to be so tough, and why this ranking I think this week will tell us a lot too, is the committee. And you can argue this either way you want to, because I'm not saying I think they should. It's just I don't know what happens. And first off, they probably don't beat Georgia, so who cares? But like, the committee could spin it as, okay, they lost those 2 games, but then who are they now? And they will have, since that loss, 3 of the 6 best wins in all of college football this year. And it's like that, in this scenario, that version of LSU that would have just won the SEC title game, there's no way you could argue they don't deserve to be one of the 4 best teams. So it's like, that's what's tough. And I don't know what you do, because you can't, they've never been a 2-loss team, right? I don't think it's ever happened, but you've also never seen the SEC.
Tennessee's a roadblock for even an SEC champion LSU. And you'd have to have 3 SEC teams in if you're going to put LSU in. Because Georgia, obviously, doesn't matter what happens.
But then that head-to-head thing you're saying, like, but then LSU beating Georgia kind of neutralizes that.
I don't think so. think so. Because you're still talking about a 1-loss team versus a 2-loss team.
Yeah, I just don't know the answer. But I want to ask you then, where do you have Tennessee in your ranking? Because I think the Tennessee-Oregon thing will also be really interesting, where they rank them right now.
I had them 4 this week. I think you could make a case either way between them and TCU. Yes. I do think that the TCU game control stuff is real. I think the committee will do to TCU what they did last week, in that I think they looked at Alabama and they said, well, Alabama went on the road to Tennessee. They lost a close game. Tennessee's our number 1 team. And TCU's undefeated, but if TCU played that game, they would have lost that game. And we think if TCU and Alabama played on a neutral field, right or wrong, they're going to lose. That's why I think Alabama was ahead of TCU last week. Yes. I think they'll do the same thing to Tennessee this week.
I think you're right.
Well, Tennessee went on the road to Georgia. They lost by 2 touchdowns, but we think if TCU did that, they would do the same thing. And Tennessee's game control is better than TCU.
Yes.
They have better wins. So I think Tennessee will hold on to that 4 spot ahead of TCU. TCU keeps winning. They'll probably get over Tennessee at some point, but I don't think they're there just yet now. And of course, when they have a conference champion piece, that matters at the end.
That'll
help TCU goes all the way and wins the SEC or wins the Big 12. Obviously, they'll go above Tennessee. But this week, I think Tennessee hangs on to the 4 spot. And I gotta say, also for the Tennessee fans listening, they haven't been paying attention to the rankings for good reason for the last 7 or 8 years. They do not operate in the same way that the polls do. You can win and drop. It happens. It happens all the time. Nobody knows better than TCU, who, if I recall correctly, was sitting there at number 3 on the last weekend of the season in 2014, won 55-3 on the road at Iowa State, and dropped from 3 to 5.
I really don't know how, as a fan, I would never get over that. I actually don't think I ever could get over that.
It happens, guys. So listen, the polls do not operate in the same way that the committee does. You don't have to lose to drop. So the fact that Tennessee is probably going to be 4 on Tuesday does not mean that, we're good. We're good.
Which is going to make this the most interesting, maybe the most interesting week of the year for it, because it's like, okay, how do they react to Ohio State playing that badly? How do they react to the Tennessee loss, but they still have the best resume, all that stuff. It's like, do they change their mind on things? Or because, they had a lot of stuff go not wrong, but like kind of look bad this week. And it's just, how do they not admit they're wrong, but do they adjust week to week on performance, or are they still looking at more of the grand scheme? And I know it doesn't. The answer is probably no, because Ohio State, Michigan will still play. So they're like, we don't have to solve this problem. And that's probably the right answer. But I just want to know, like, where's Oregon compared to Tennessee? Where's TCU compared to Tennessee? Because that will be telling in 4 weeks.
And by the way, Michigan's better than Ohio State, but the committee will find
that out in time.
Of
Michigan plus 8.5, and I'm
it's
love that.
Right. Well, Brody, that said, we got to get on. First of all, before we get to the game itself,
oh my God,
Brody's star turn as the cover boy for the Baton Rouge Advocate. So we got to see this photo. If you have not seen it, we'll bring it up on the screen. Our producer, John, will bring it up. This is the cover of the Baton Rouge Advocate on Sunday morning. Bright and early, and right front center, we have the co-host of Football and Grits, Brody Miller, looking great, right between Jaden Daniels and who is this? I'm blanking on the name.
I don't know.
Either way, Brody, you're looking good. I will say, so for those who aren't familiar with kind of how this all works, so most writers will watch the game in the press box, and then with about 5 to 10 minutes left, we'll come down to the field. I get a lot of color on the field. I like to come down. Yeah. I missed it a lot during the COVID era. Most fields were blocked off. So Brody just happened to be in the right or wrong place, depending on your interpretation, at the wrong time of a classic game. You got a much better game. You got a field storming as well. The second in 2 games. 3 weeks?
2 consecutive games, yeah.
How about that? I need to see those analytics. If anybody's stormed the field 2 consecutive games, especially at a power program like LSU. $500,000.
$500,000. But as I pointed out, I believe that is 1/200th of what they will be paying Brian Kelly. So if you phrase it like that, who the hell cares? But
so, Brody, I'll tee this up for you. I think at the end of the day, that a game was I don't know that I'd call it a narrative shifter, because I've been iffy on Bama all year. You have
been full throttle on
that. I hate giving you credit. I've been hitting the alarm bells. I've been like,
I thought you were so dramatic when you were just like, they're going to lose to Tennessee. They're not that good. And I'm just like, I get it, but that's dramatic. And it's like, no, you were right. Tip of the cap.
I think people were enamored with Bama on paper, and I wrote about it this morning. Like, returning starters, the Adjamir Gibbs, Bryce Young's a Heisman winner. They have Will Anderson. They were enamored with what they saw on paper, and weren't watching the games, but they just shouldn't play well at Texas. Texas isn't that good. Texas is a 3-loss team, and they got taken to the brink by Texas's backup quarterback, right?
Yes.
A&M's not very good, and A&M took them to the brink. So I've been on the Bama is not great this year all year, because who knows, Brody? I've been watching the games and watching Bama and saying, this team. This is not my kind of team right here. This is not getting it done. So I thought they'd beat LSU, but ultimately, so I don't think it's a narrative shifter. But what does this tell you, Brody, about, first off, LSU in year 1, 2? Yeah. There's still a lot of football to be played, but got the inside track to winning the West in year 1 under Brian Kelly, with a team that had a lot of moving parts. And then what do you feel like this says about Bama ultimately? You were there in person. What do you make of your takeaways from that game?
Yeah. First off, I'd like to say I think the editor was in a tough cropping job there, because it's like, they probably just wanted to focus in on me, but it's hard with how little space you have to crop Jaden Daniels and the Alabama defender out.
Well, you got to do what you got to do. You can't have a super thin.
That would be tough. It'd be
I would have done that. Yeah, I would have done that.
The blurriness would really stink. I'm a little embarrassed. My jeans are a little dad jeany, a little baggy. I thought they fit a little snugger, but that's a little bagginess. So I got to work on that. But all the rest, I'm pretty confident. I got a bit of
It's so funny, because at the end of the day, journalism school day 1, you are not the story.
I am the story.
And the front page of the paper, one of the biggest wins for LSU probably since 19, right?
Definitely.
Brody's
just making a derp face, just looking like I'm zoning out.
Paper. I got home from Georgia at 2:30 a.m. and that was the first thing I saw. And I saw there was a conversation in our work Slack about it, and then I saw your tweet about it, and I was, oh my gosh, so funny, incredible.
It's my girlfriend's having fun with it. But so I think my real reaction watching that game was I think those were 2 really great defenses. It's funny how sometimes a fourth quarter can ruin the story of a whole game, because for 3 quarters it was now Bama's offense just has questions, but that LSU defense, I mean, both defenses were flying around. Bama's defense looked good, and they are ranked as like the number 5 SP plus defense. That defense is a little slept on, and thanks, Reagan. Brody's the most important part of the whole weekend. I couldn't agree more, man. But yeah, I think this was a beautiful defensive game where both defensive lines were just causing havoc. And yes, I think we are now officially 9 games in, ready to just say, with all the compilation of everything that's happened this year, Alabama is not that great. They are probably like the 13th best team in the country, or 12th. Like, that's just what they are. That's rare, but it's just the reality. But I think this game, I think it's fair to accept that and still say this game was always going to be a referendum on, okay, were the Ole Miss games and the Florida games just kind of, hey, they figured it out for 2 weeks, nice little outliers, but they're still this kind of just flawed, vulnerable team? Or is LSU, is that just really them turning a corner? And I think coming out of that game, I feel very confident at this point saying, like, they belong. Like, they are actually a team that, again, don't think they're top 4, but they are a top 8 team in the country. And I now feel confident about that, because those things that seem like, man, that defense just finally figured it all out, or Jaden Daniels finally figured it all out. Is that real, though? I think you have enough 3 tough game data point to say Jaden Daniels really is a really great quarterback, and might even be a dark horse to get invited to New York, which is just crazy to say after week like 3. Like, oh my god.
I would have believed you in April, but I would not have believed you in October.
There's no way. Like, it was a problem, and now it is. He is the guy elevating them. It's unbelievable. So that's what jumps out. It's just like we keep saying every week, like, man, that's coaching, right? A team gets better. That's not the norm. And to see them actually be, I think the week 3 version of this team was probably the 30th best team in the country. Like, that's who they were. Now they're probably the 6th or 7th. That's wild. And the defense is officially there. Like, that secondary even impressed me. That's supposed to be the weakness, all that. They made big plays throughout the game. And now they finally are at this zone with Harold Perkins and Ojulari and this pass rush just getting after teams. That front 7 next to Georgia is as tough as anyone in college football. Clemson's was supposed to be amazing. It's not the normal Clemson front you expect. Like, this is an elite front. Harold Perkins, I almost don't know what to say. Like, I keep saying, like, man, he's not just the best freshman. He might be the best, one of the 5 best. Like, he's one of the most talented players in college football right now. It is absurd. There's things he's doing that you're like, I don't even know if Devin White was doing that. So yeah, I think we're at a point where LSU's just pretty darn good, and a lot of that. And we'll get to like what this tells you about Brian Kelly in a second. But man, they belong.
I had people harassing me for not talking about Harold Perkins in my SEC review. He was unbelievable. Either way, I think, I was down on LSU to start the season, and I felt like that Florida State game confirmed it. But I called him in the piece I wrote this morning. I called him the most improved team in the SEC, because that's what it is. Yeah. They have turned me into a believer. I really liked what I saw from them. I think the Ole Miss game was the game that made me sit up and say, oh, I think I might have been wrong about this team. And maybe not so much wrong as if that team just changed.
Yeah, you weren't wrong. I think that's the
watching Florida State, I was kind of like, because I kind of thought LSU looked like a 6-7 win team to start the season. And when I watched Florida State, I said, well, that looks like about a 6 or 7 win team.
Or the Auburn game. They played terrible. Yeah. They won, sure, but that was not a good football team.
But they are a really good team right now. And I think ultimately, I think Bama's probably closer to one of the top 7, 8, 9, 10 teams in the country, probably. Yeah. But if you can beat them, you're going toe-to-toe with them. And I think that wasn't fluky at all. Like, LSU was just their equal for 60 minutes. But it's, it was an impressive performance at the end of the day. And so the LSU part of it is the fact that you can go from sitting there and being a team that looked really average in week 1 to now you're sitting here in November and you look like probably not a playoff team, but not a playoff team, I guess, if we can say. Yeah. Like, I got to say, Brody, that might be why you pay a coach, $100 million. $100
million. And I think the best way to frame that part of it is that this year results didn't matter. Like, it's not about like how good they are this year. It was never going to be about that. This year was about, even if you went 7-5, it was going to be about like, does it look like it's going to work? Does it look like there's the building blocks and the progress? That's just all it was. So they might go 9-3, they might go 10-2, like all that stuff. Well, it should go 10-2. But it was never about that. But what it shows now is like, oh, you actually can buy in on the future now. And again, I'm not saying I believe this 1-to-1 because it's not how it works. But it's literally evidence now that the one thing you look back on those Notre Dame years was this guy clearly is one of the best program runners in the country. But clearly when he played the Alabamas and the Clemsons, like he couldn't overcome the talent gap. And that's a complicated discussion because how much is he? Why there was a talent gap? That's really like you could spend hours debating that. And I don't know my feelings, but this is the first year he has that kind of SEC talent. By the way, this isn't even that great of an LSU team. Anyone would agree with that. Clear holes in this roster. The first year he has that kind of talent. He beats Bama, beats a top 10 Ole Miss. Like he's doing this stuff. And it's like, oh, maybe that theory is real. Like maybe that theory is real. If you give him 5-star classes, he will win a national title. And that is a fair take now.
That's the thing. I think that's the big question for me that coming out of that game is what does this mean for Brian Kelly moving forward? Because I think the dream, if you're an LSU fan and why you hire Brian Kelly, you say, well, he can do the same things at Notre Dame where he wins 10 games every year and then he wins 12 and 13, in the expanded playoff, 14, 15, maybe in peak years.
Yep.
And and you have to wonder, okay, does this translate? Can he recruit in Louisiana? Notre Dame certainly plays a weaker schedule than you would playing in the SEC West. You don't quite have the same like week to week, just beatdowns. But they, when you have the roster that he's going to have at LSU, considering, like you said, that this, fair to say, Brody, you can't look into the future. But if you told me this will be the worst roster that Brian Kelly ever has at LSU,
probably.
I would say probably, right?
Probably fair, yep.
Not very deep, patched together, has some holes. Obviously, you have some standouts, but you got a lot of – that's why I really was not into this team. I was like, they're really talented. They got some really great dudes at the top, but you need more than that. Like Georgia shows, you need like 8 guys, that you can lean on. And when guys go down, when Nolan Smith gets hurt, you got to have guys that step in. I was like, LSU doesn't have that, but it hadn't seemed to matter this year. And
to build on that,
is this a situation where he's going to be a 10-win, 11-win coach every single year? That's interesting because you can get a guy with that pedigree, and it works this quickly, this well. You have to wonder.
And it's also like, and I just want to quickly say, recruiting is the real question, right? Like, yes, he has some talent, but like, can they get you to the Georgia Bamas? I don't know if he's going to have 1-2 classes, but just so you know, he's the number 4 class in college football right now. In the days before the game, he got another top 150 offensive lineman. So they have now like 3 top 150 linemen, which is so key for LSU. And then he got a 5-star quarterback in 2024 and Colin Hurley days before this game. And then they got another commitment within like 30 minutes after the game. And they're looking really good now for 2 top 50 corners and Desmond Ricks and Javon Taviano. Like, this like might be the number 2 or 3 class in the country now. And that is something that even 2 months ago, I'm just like, Brian Kelly's gonna have a nice top 8 class, and that's a good year, but like, let's pump the brakes. And now it's actually really rolling. But the thing that I think is also fascinating is, and I don't want to overreact to this, but I've always wondered with your Brian Kelly's, like, how do I put this? Like, we watched them win for so long. How good of an actual like coach are you? And it's not like I'm saying you're not. I just have this, there's this weird like separation that happens when a coach just steadily wins for a long time. And it's like, is he just a program guy, but he's not like a great coach? I just don't know. And I think you're seeing this year the coaching. You're seeing like Jaden Daniels gets better. This defense gets better. O-line went from bad to a strength, all that stuff. And it's like you had 2 weeks to go against Alabama, and LSU kind of outcoached them, which was shocking to watch. Like, they had that defense on their toes, the way they were using Daniels, RPOs. They always had him off balance. They countered pressure so well. And they made Matt House, I think, is one of the best coordinators. I think we talked about this last week too. Like, Matt House is an elite defensive coordinator.
I really like that hire when they made it. I said that's kind of outside the box, but it checks so many boxes.
Because he was so good at Kentucky. Yeah, and now has the NFL background. And he proved Mississippi State game and this game proved the most. Like, he's so good at breaking tendency and getting pressure in ways that, like, hey, teams are going to do this, but then he still brings pressure in a way that you're not expecting it to come and just makes life so difficult. So, man, like, they outcoach them in a lot of ways. So it's like, I'm now kind of coming around on, like, Brian Kelly's just a good football coach too. And you're seeing that, like, okay, you give that talent. Yeah, man. Like, I don't think they're going to be like a playoff contender next year. They'll probably be in this same zone, that same zone of like, hey, you can go 10-2, be really good. But year 3, man, there's no reason this team shouldn't be actually up there. Does
Daniels have one more year?
He does. And that is another fun discussion.
I thought he did. I don't think he's a guy that should leave early, but I think he what a full off season for him will be very interesting.
But you just never know with those like 4-year starter guys of like
Mm-hmm.
it's like I think I brought this up like it's like a center in college basketball where it's like a lot of times it just makes sense to go even if you're not going to get your stock's not going to improve because just like I'd rather just go.
In the NIL era, it matters too. You know, it's a little bit different in football,
you get some
but
money, yeah.
if you can make some money and your stock's not going to be meaningfully changed, I think Jane Daniels, in terms of pro prospect, probably is who he is. I feel like another year would help him, especially in this offense. Yeah. It's a little bit different in basketball where your options are go to Europe and make 6 figures or stay and play on national TV and probably make about the same amount of money if you're a star, the Drew Timmies of the world. Which, by the way, Brody, I found out last week the college basketball starts like tomorrow. Today, whatever. Anyway,
wild.
Sneaks up on you. But I think, the LSU flip is so interesting because for the longest time, Brody, under Les Miles, under Ed Orgeron, everybody's like, oh, they got OBJ, they got the Honey Badger, they got all these guys, and they're winning, but they're kind of winning in spite of their coach, right? Nobody respects Les Miles. Nobody respects Ed Orgeron, even though they're national champions and all that stuff. And this team is not playing up to its talent level. And now all of a sudden, probably, Brody, is this the least talented LSU team in 15 years?
That
top to bottom.
I don't want to pretend I know the answer to that, but it's in that conversation. Yeah, it's
not a great team. Yeah. And then the coaching is kind of flipped on you, and now they're like maximizing this. It's the narrative flip is very. LSU is like one of the most interesting teams in the country, just because they have changed so much from the team that we saw lose to Florida State. I mean, the offense was a disaster, the defense was kind of whatever, and then the special teams, errors at the end, but ended up losing you again. Like that is insane.
I have a whole theory on why LSU is the most interesting team in college football, like in a 30-year prism. And I think it's because I think they're generally agreed to be a top 5 or 6 job, right? I think some put them as high as like 3. Yeah. It's the only one of those that their base, though, is kind of more like 9-3, 10-2. And they are the only one of those jobs that what happens on the field is a literal referendum on the coaching and like how good you can run that program.
You're probably right. That's
so they're perfect because it's like, you can go 9-3 and you're fine. Like you have the resources to be the best team in the country at LSU. You have the talent, the resources, the money, all that stuff. But you're not expected to. And you also have the scenarios where because of a bunch of problems and weird stuff, you can go 6-6 there. So it's the only one of those where it's like, how good are you is immediately reflected, I think. So it's like, I don't know. It's the best job to cover, best team to cover because it's going to be a lightning rod. If they go 7-5, it's a disaster. And if they go 12-0, it's also shocking or like a story. So it's so fun.
It's interesting. Reagan Trahan wants to know if Jaden Daniels comes back. I'd have to call Dane Brugler and ask exactly how NFL people see him. He doesn't look like a guy that should be coming out to me. But you never really know. And maybe that changes over the next month. Guys can change. I feel like he would benefit from another year. I would say, just me talking, surely not. But I could be wrong. I need to see where his stock is because I don't. Yeah. He's not a name that I have heard a lot where like NFL people are kind of like, oh, hey, we're watching this kid. So
he will probably like go just because of his athleticism. Someone will take a chance in like the 5th or 6th round, right? Like that feels like right. But it's. I think, as we said earlier, like I just always wonder with the 4-year starter, it's just like, do I just go and try to get in the NFL and try to like get in a system and figure it out? Because like, is it going to get better? I don't know. But the other thing that helps his case though for coming back, I didn't know this until recently. He's still only 21, 4th-year guy. He's 21, so it's like staying isn't necessarily hurting you or anything like that. He could point to the growth, but you could also argue because he's playing this well right now, like is his stock ever going to be like more higher and people focusing on it? Maybe it just is what it is, and you take a chance.
Brody, looking elsewhere in the division.
Yeah.
Auburn finally pulled the trigger on Brian Harsin. The program was kind of stuck in purgatory for weeks. I mean, where everyone kind of knows this is coming. Brody, Auburn's got a little juice. Before we get to the future, the now, Coach Caddy. I mentioned in my column, we should have had the video queued up. I don't have it for our producer, but the pregame interview with Cole Kubelik Cadillac couldn't help but get a little emotional, sort of taking in the moment. And I think you look at his post-game talk with his players that Auburn tweeted out as well from about 3 or 4 minutes. Dude, like, there's something different. Like, there's something different from a fan base and how they resonate with guys when you can tell how much that school means to them. That this is not just a job to you. That this is not just, oh, I'm finally a head coach or whatever. And, dude, I am convinced that if you cut open Cadillac Williams, he's just going to be bleeding blue and orange. Like, the dude loves Auburn. And that means something, but you also got to show it on the field. And obviously a really shaky start for Auburn. 24-3, they go down. And I think for them to rally, take the lead, even though they did lose to a pretty good Mississippi State team, that team played really, really hard. And I think what you're going to see in Auburn on Saturday night, a really special atmosphere, I think. I think this program is ready to move forward. The Harsin hire, I think Brian Harsin can be a good coach. I think he'll have a good second act somewhere. If I'm Colorado, I'm looking at him. Maybe Arizona State, I might look at him. Anyway, but they're ready to move forward. And, man, Cadillac, the dude, like, you can see why players respond to him. Like, the dude knows Auburn, loves Auburn, and people just react differently when coaches that are leading their program, they can feel that. And he's really inexperienced, man. He doesn't have a lot of experience coaching. And we'll see what, I think whoever takes the Auburn job, we'll get to that in a second, has got to keep him on staff. You need those guys. One, to help you understand, because whoever Auburn hires is probably not going to have the same kind of ties. And you need that guy in your office to say, hey, man, the Auburn diehards, or you as somebody who knows this school and loves this school, what do you think about this? When you're saying, oh, we don't want to take this hometown kid, or, oh, we want to do this thing or that thing, or you make big program changes, or every coach puts their stamp on the program, and sometimes it alienates the OGs of a program.
That's true.
And having Cadillac in the house, I feel like you got to retain him. And he's a pretty good running back. I feel like he looks like he can still go, by the way.
God, he does. Like he looks like he could still go for 600 yards a year in the NFL right now. Yeah.
So anyway, we'll see. But what did you make of the Tigers without Brian Harsin on the sidelines?
Yeah, I think the way you put it, I think is important. That it's like, Cadillac Williams isn't going to get the job or anything like that. But it's about, like, Auburn has become a joke, unfortunately. Like, they have become a laughing stock. And I think what mattered there is these next 4 weeks or whatever is kind of just getting a sense of, God, I hate not being this corny, but a sense of love back, a sense of, like,
bring the pride back.
The pride. That's a good way to put it. And like you said, it's going to be an amazing environment Saturday. And just, like, getting it back so by the time you make this hire, the fans are back in to an extent. They care, I guess, a little. There's just a little bit of, like, better PR, even though it's not, like, not literally, but that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that is relevant. And it's funny because we both have always been on, like, Auburn's not bad. They are just poorly managed in so many ways.
They've never on the field. They've never devolved into, like, oh my gosh,
like Chad Morris, Arkansas, or something.
They've just been like, this team kind of stinks. Like, that's as bad as they've been. They've never really gotten, like, really ugly.
Yeah, like, they've played everyone close. But yeah, I think that means something also to come back like that. And we both are very high on that team, Mississippi State team. So it does say something.
Well, that's the thing, is I think in that situation, your coach gets fired, you're down 3 touchdowns, you're on the road, there's a lot of reasons to fold. And Auburn did not. Robbie Ashford played really well, made a ton of plays. He was running hard. So I think for them to come back the way that they did does speak to a lot of the investment in the program. Now, if you're Auburn, what do you do? If it's me, Brody, I'm putting the full court press on Lane Kiffin.
Yep.
If I'm Lane, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I like what I got at Ole Miss. I'm not fully convinced that I can, if you're Lane, I feel like if you're going to make one more move, it has to be the place that you're just going to be, right?
Or a place that's clearly a step up. Yeah.
Yes. And I think Auburn certainly historically is a better job than Ole Miss, and I think he could do well there. But if I'm saying this is going to be the job for me, the next job, you can be selective. You're Lane Kiffin. He's got Ole Miss going. He's got some capital there. It's not going to be a situation where you're the hot name that then becomes, not the hot name very soon after. I think I call that the Matt Campbell corollary right now.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be that guy. Like, you have a long history of having success in a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. So a thing or two about coaching. So if I'm Kiffin, I'm staying away from Auburn. But if I'm Auburn, I'm going whatever it takes to get Lane to be my head coach. That's where I'm going.
Yeah, the only thing that's like, and I will not pretend I have any insight into Lane Kiffin, but like, we all heard, right, that he was kind of like, what you do is more than what you say, and it's like, he was pretty interested in Miami last year, right? Like, he kind of did poke around on that, I thought. And wasn't he also kind of interested in Auburn 2 years ago? Like, I don't know if that's agenting or just leverage or just like, hey, it's interesting, I'll look into it. But like, maybe he views it differently than we do. But I do agree with you in the grand sense. I think Andy Staples' point has always been, right, like, there are only X amount of jobs where there's evidence you can win a national title. And maybe a lot of coaches still do view it as like Auburn has proven they can. So like Ole Miss has never proven they can. Now, I want to ask you this before I get to like my answer is, how much do you think, and I'm really fascinated by this. Right now, Auburn is probably a top 10 job in the country, right? Like, in theory, like, I know the alignment stuff is a real thing, but historically it's a top 10 job. And a part of that is you're probably the third biggest program in the West, fourth or fifth in the SEC as a whole. Like, you clearly have a roadmap to being great if you have the right hire. But does it change at all with Oklahoma and Texas coming? And not in terms of like, that's a better job, but just like, does your place and your path change when you're one day like the fifth best in the SEC, third best in the West, to now you're like the eighth, ninth biggest job out of 16? Like, does that just change the framing of how good that is? I don't know. The answer might be no, because maybe the SEC is now just so powerful that it's actually like a better job. I don't know. But what do you think?
Well, big picture, I think things change. I think there's an element of things are cyclical. In some places, the booster element just never goes away. Texas is one of those where you just, and Auburn seems to be one of those. I think we mentioned last week, I forget. I've been on the radio, I don't remember. But like, even for all the success that Gus Malzahn had, I feel like he was on the hot seat for like 6 years.
Every year.
I don't want to I just wouldn't want to deal with that. And I think the alignment stuff, you can talk about history, you can talk about what might be, you can talk about the future, but on some level, that's a now. And as a head coach, you talk about control the controllables. I'm not sure you can control like the booster influence. Brian Harsin did a lot of things to make himself in a worse position. Didn't really ingratiate himself to that, the recruiting aspect of it. And then, of course, on the field, the most important part, didn't get it done. But as far as how boosters saw him,
they were out day one.
Yeah, you can't really control that. And I would have a lot of hesitancy to jump into that. Because that's now. That's real. And I think it's different if you're a guy like a Brian Harsin or like a Hugh Freeze or a place that you might not have another option. Okay, if you want to get in the SEC and you want to go to this big job, Auburn, I might run there. Obviously, Hugh Freeze would do that. I think, we'll see, that Brian Harsin seemed really into going to Auburn, right? But if I'm Lane Kiffin or I'm a coach like a Brian Kelly or like a Lincoln Riley, like I've said for this coaching carousel last year, kind of reset your expectations. Or if you're a coach, like I said, in the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, leagues that are declining because of the shifting sands of college football. If I have some picks and if I have a lot of options, do I want to jump into the Auburn pool?
Yeah.
I'd have some misgivings. I don't really want people going over my head, making up stuff about my family. When I didn't meet your expectations or I wasn't who you wanted to be. That it's a problem. It is. This is the same reason. Brent Venables said rather explicitly that Auburn had talked to him and said, he was very uncomfortable with a lot of the alignment issues and all that stuff. So it's a real thing.
Billy Napier, that was part of why he didn't go for it 2 years ago.
It's a real thing. And so some coaches may disagree with me, and maybe Auburn hires a great coach. But I'm telling you, this stuff will affect it. And it might not affect it on the field. And if you're winning, hey, winning heals everything. But like I said, Gus Malzahn won a lot. He beat Bama a lot. And it still felt like he was on the hot seat for like 6 years. And I just don't know that I want to live that way.
Yeah. So to my, I think we both kind of think this way. Like, I am so anti like the exciting hire most of the time, almost any time. Like, I can promise you, as someone covered LSU their last coaching cycle, and someone who lives in Louisiana, every friend I have was just in my ear about LSU has to hire Lane Kiffin, has to. And I was like, no, that is the opposite of what LSU needs right now. They don't need like the sexy scheme coach right now, or the guy they need a guy who is a CEO who will like build it right. It's why I even thought Mark Stoops would have been a good hire.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so I preface all that to say, Auburn is, I think, in one of the very rare situations right now where I kind of think you need a juice hire. I think you need like a guy who is going to just like add a buzz, not just because you need to change the PR and all that, but because of the booster thing. I think they need somebody that is going to be like exciting, and somebody who the boosters are just going to get like, heck yeah, what do you want? And follow him, and he'll have at least a few years of cushion. And that's not, even though I love the idea of Mark Stoops at Auburn. I don't think that's happening, but like, I love that idea.
Yeah,
I think that would be a bad move, because I think it would be polarizing. I think it would be like half the boost, even talking to people who cover Auburn, like half those boosters would be like, yes, half would be like, absolutely not. I want my scheme guru guy. And I think it would lead to a problem. I think Elaine would absolutely get that juice. The boosters would be like, what do you want? I'll give it to you. Recruits would be like, that is now the cool transfer portal school to go to, not just because he's the portal king, but like you could see the path to being great in a year, and you would recruit better. And you need somebody that you're not going to be better than Bama in a vacuum, but you need somebody that's going to, I keep saying like the punch guy, like the guy who's just like, but you could punch at Bama every other year or something like that, because you got a Lane Kiffin. So I think Lane makes sense for that reason. So then the question is, if we agree it's not Lane, that like he might not want to take it, which I don't know, who's next there? Because I don't know if they'd go Dion. And the interesting thing here, because this doesn't check this box, the highest odds right now by far are Jeff Grimes, which
I had a couple people talk to me about that. I'm a big Jeff Grimes guy.
I love him. He's amazing. I think he's a great coach.
I think when
he has Auburn connections.
When he did at BYU with the Mormon Manziel was unbelievable. And also he's like 6'8", so that's good. He's very tall. He's extremely tall.
Boosters try to mess up his life. Like, he'll win.
I know he's got that offensive lineman blood in it, but no, he's that's like a good example of like really not a sexy hire, and I think people would revolt if they hired Jeff Grimes, and I think it might work out for him. So
that's the thing. It's like, I would like if you took the booster thing out. Oh, that might be my first choice. He'd be so good there. I love that idea. He's been at so many big schools and SEC schools. Like he's been at LSU and Auburn, and obviously like in Baylor. Like he would know how to run that. I think you have to think about the booster thing. And then the last wrinkle in this, we can wrap up soon, is like the John Cohen element of this. Like Mike Leach was flashy. Joe Moorhead was even though I'm a big, like he was the flavor of the week in a lot of ways. Like he kind of wants scheme and new forward thinking in a lot of his hires. Does that point to like a thinking outside the box? Does that point to like a Chadwell? I don't know.
Yeah. Brody, rough week for the picks last week. We didn't do very well.
That was pretty bad, actually. Yeah.
Real bad. But hey, shoot or shoot, Brody. Shoot.
Yes.
We're back.
We just have to tell ourselves that it's going to revert to the mean, and we're actually going to be great.
I will let you go first. What do you got for us this week as we close the show with our picks of the week?
I don't actually love anything that much this week, which is why I'm making the pick that just hurts my soul, but I really like it. And you actually are talking me out of it because of your Cadillac point and like how that place is going to be hopping. But I'm going A&M +2. I know it's so stupid.
Oh my gosh.
It's terrible.
You're going to fight the trend lines.
I really think it's like, first off, they actually kind of made that a ball game for a while with their entire like 2 deep out. And I think if they're healthy and all that, like if Wegman's back, all that, like I like the way they're progressing, and I like. Thank you, John, for putting "Pray for Me" in there.
Bold move, Brody.
I really like that's my play. Also, I saw like a 40% market differential toward A&M, which like like the money to the bets, and I'm like, I think I like A&M.
I will say, man, Vegas. They don't build the hotels and put all the shiny lights up because they're dumb. And I think I was talking to a friend of mine who was texting me about this. He said, the Tennessee stuff, where like 94% of the money was on Tennessee, and that line it moved a lot at the start. It was like 11.5, and then it moved to like 9 and 8.5, and then it just stuck.
Oh, dude!
And all the money kept piling up on Tennessee, and it was not moving.
Oh, but to go even more inside baseball, it was 8.5 right for a while, and then it went down to about 7.5 for about 10 minutes, literally. And millions went on. Like the Sharps were waiting for their number, and the millions went on Georgia 7.5, and like you said, it got back up. So
I said, a friend who was texting me, I said, yeah, I was like, that's a pretty concerning sign because that was a big like Vegas knows moment. Like
All
when they
time,
let that money collect and they don't move the line, that's where you're like, oh, Vegas really disagrees with the public here, and a big Vegas knows moment. But Brody, my pick of the week, couple good defenses going head to head, Mississippi State and Georgia. Maybe this is just me having seen Georgia's defense in person. 52.5 feels like a big number. I think Mississippi State can slow down Georgia. I think Georgia's going to try to run the ball, and Mississippi State can hold up.
I like
that 3-3-5 does pretty well against the running game. I just don't think they're going to get to this number. I think Georgia, we could see another Georgia game where they maybe play down to their competition a little bit. That was a big game, big atmosphere. You're not probably going to have that again coming off. So I'm going under.
And just to build your case, by the way, what's like the one thing State struggles with? Like, it's like when teams let them get their yards, but then like can lock down in the red zone. And Georgia's the literal best.
A lot of field goals. A lot of field goals for Mississippi State. If Mississippi State scores more than 1.5 touchdowns, I'll be shocked in this game.
I would agree with that.
So, and I'm not sure that I believe Georgia is just going to be rolling up 40 points against Mississippi State's defense. 52 is a big number from what I see. So, and then of course, Alabama on the road laying 2 touchdowns. Absolutely not against a very competent, dare I say, strong Ole Miss team. I'm not sure Ole Miss wins this game, but 12 points is too many for how many times we need to see Alabama go on the road. Ole Miss is better than Texas.
Right.
Ole Miss is, Alabama probably wins this game, but not. Ole Miss is good. I don't know what's.
Yeah, I'm ready to say they're good. Like, it's fair. Yeah,
that's my pick of the week. It's gonna be better.
I just don't like the idea of Saban off a loss. That's the only reason
You're not wrong.
But no, you're right too.
I believe I was burned on this earlier when I took Mississippi State.
You did. It was like third. Yeah, blood.
Wait,
before we wrap up, I just gotta say, Reagan, thank you for all your questions today. Asked about Bill O'Brien to Auburn. No, his stock is lower than it's ever been. Like
Alabama will be laughing as loudly as anyone has ever laughed at a coaching hire if that happens. It will not happen.
He's had a tough 2 years. I think that's fair to say. Like,
I'm not sure Bill O'Brien's going to be Alabama's OC next year.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. And then what about Urban Meyer? I mean, they are desperate enough to be like, we'll take the PR hit. Let's do it. So I don't know, but I just can't imagine. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I also can't imagine John Cohen making that hire, but what do I know?
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening. What a week of games, Brody. This week's games leave a little bit to be desired. So it's worth talking about last week. And man, impressive stuff from Georgia, impressive stuff from LSU. It's going to be a fun last month as we sort of chase this playoff race and the coaching carousel heats up. We'll see what that looks like. I'm excited to see this Auburn atmosphere behind Coach Caddy on Saturday night. It's going to be fun. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Brody, back. Hopefully, Brody will be on the front page of another newspaper.
I'm just going to start camping out behind important plays all the time, man.
What we need people to start photoshopping Brody into important moments in history. Like
Max Olson did send me, our colleague Max Olson sent me a photo. I'm sorry I didn't send it to John, of me at the moon landing.
That sounds about right. It was a little bit like back in the old school Deadspin days, the old Ned photo of the Miami FIU brawl with Ned coming in on the crutches. Back in the OG Deadspin days, people were photoshopping him like storming the beach at Normandy and doing all kinds of stuff. We need Brody sitting there.
Yeah.
Brody's just standing there on the grassy knoll in 1967 or whatever. Anyway, that seems like a great note to send you guys on your merry way. We'll be back here next week talking a lot of SEC football. I don't know that the games are going to be quite as good as they were on Saturday, but hey, we'll be here talking about them. I'm sure something will happen. Maybe if you're a chair, watch your back because Mike Leach is coming for you. So thank you guys. Talk to you guys next week. See ya.